Welcome back to the Utah Legislative Update. This is KHQN 1480 Radio and live streaming at utahtalkradio.com. This is Senator Wayne Neiderhauser, President of the Utah Senate, and with me today is Representative Ken Ivory. We've been having a robust discussion on federalism. Representative Ivory has done a tremendous amount of research. Legal research is one of the foremost in our country on this discussion on federalism. We just want to remind our listeners that the purpose of our discussions every week is to get you folks involved, and we want to direct you to some websites where you can get information. UtahTalkRadio.com has links to the Utah Legislative website, where there you can listen to committee hearings, watch floor debates. You can get all kinds of information on bills. There's WayneNeiderhauser.com, and we'll have Representative Ivory tell us a little bit about some of the other areas where are some other websites, some other sources of information. But we invite you to call at 1-800-776-1913. I think I mentioned 1930 before. It's 1913, the same year that a number of things were enacted here in the country. I think the Federal Reserve and a couple of other things. So remember 776-1913. So Representative Ivory, tell us a little bit about, or tell us more, or give us some more direction on where we get some information on this discussion that's going forth so people can get involved.
Well, so we've got the book, Where's the Line, America.com, or Where's America, or Where's the Line, How States Protect the Constitution. And there's a website, Where's the Line, America.com. The book's available there. It's available on Amazon. Again, the idea of the book is for state representatives, people that elect state representatives, to understand what they intended in the rights, powers of states. And then, as you know, because President, you and I have been teaming on the sponsorship of many of these bills, the land issue. And we had a hearing up at the state yesterday. The land issue is so critical, and you know, I don't know if your camera can pick that up, but there's a website called AmericanLandsCouncil.com or .org, I think it is actually, AmericanLandsCouncil.org. The federal government controls nearly 70% of the land in the state of Utah, more than 50% of the land in all of the western states. And when you go back constitutionally, life, liberty, and property were the unalienable rights. They said pursuit of happiness. They meant property, and they didn't want to elevate the issue of slavery and that property question. But all of the state constitutions said life, liberty. Well, think about that. We have a great statement from our one and only Utah member who was on the U.S. Supreme Court, George Sutherland, and he said, to give a man his life but deny him his liberty is to take away from him all that makes life worth living. To give him his liberty but take from him the property, which is the fruit and the badge of his liberty, is to still leave him a slave. And so this property issue becomes very critical, and so the AmericanLandsCouncil.org website deals with that issue of property, where you talk about a centralization of power. It's so stark.
Yeah, when central government starts to own a lot of property, that's where we take a wrong turn, and that was never intended from the beginning.
Yeah, never intended. In fact, our Enabling Act is the same, word for word, in the federal government's duty to dispose of the land as North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Louisiana, Alabama, for example, and they did dispose of the land. Illinois was 90% federally controlled for decades, as was Missouri and Arkansas and Louisiana and others, and one man stood up. Thomas Hart Benton, he's actually included in JFK's book, Profiles in Courage. One man stood up and he says, I went to battle in Congress, and year after year he would introduce the bill and give speeches and educate. And he said, this is just wrong. And you notice, of course, Illinois, Missouri, the others are not 90% federally controlled.
They were successful in the end.
They succeeded.
Yes.
So we need our Thomas Hart Benton in Congress, and we need to stand up and raise them up, because there's $150 trillion in mineral value locked up in the federally controlled lands. More recoverable oil in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming than the rest of the world combined, according to the Government Accountability Office.
Interesting. We had a question from a caller. It actually is part of this discussion we're having right now. The question goes, how can we, Utah, reclaim lands from the federal government, and why do Western states have such a small percentage of the lands within their borders?
Yeah, great question. So if you ask the law professor at University of Utah, his answer as to why we can't do this, he'll put up a precipitation map. I mean, I was on a continuing legal education panel.
A precipitation map?
Puts up a precipitation map, and he says, you see the difference.
This is rainfall.
Rainfall.
Or snowfall, right?
Yeah,
okay, so we're talking precipitation map.
Yep, and he'll put up a map, and it looks somewhat similar to this map on the lower 48, you know, the federally controlled lands. He'll put up a precipitation map and say, well, you see the difference in rainfall, in precipitation? Well, therefore the federal government keeps your land. That was his number one reason, Wayne.
And any explanation, a connection? I don't get the connection, do you?
No. You know, it's the Arid Clause of the Constitution, I guess. And so your listeners, don't go bother looking for the Arid Clause in the Constitution. But his follow-up reason was, well, I looked at the Enabling Acts, the statehood contract of all the Western states, and you just gave up your land. You didn't want it. Well, number one, that makes no sense. Number two, that language is the same in Louisiana and Alabama. Nebraska has 1% federally controlled lands. So really, what's happened throughout history, when the states in Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, and the others banded together and demanded politically, their lands were disposed of. Hawaii, 1959. This isn't just ancient history. When Hawaii was made a state...
In 1959?
1959. When Hawaii was made a state, the citizens banded together and said, you have to dispose of our lands. And in their Enabling Act, it says the United States hereby grants directly to the state of Hawaii title to all the public lands, title to which is held by the United States immediately prior to its admission. So if we simply want to act and move, and for the listeners, engage your state representative, engage the governor, engage the attorney general, engage our congressional delegation to take courage that this has already been done before. It's going to be a heavy lift. But there's $150 trillion in mineral value. We're $2.6 billion below average in per pupil funding, and $7 billion of our spending, number one line item of spending, comes from a federal government that tells us in its financial statements that it's broke.
So you mentioned reach out to your legislator, reach out to Senator Hatch, Senator Lee, to our Congress members in the House of U.S. House of Representatives. Reach out to them. Encourage them to be that. What was the individual's name in Illinois?
Yeah, that Thomas Hart Benton.
The Thomas Hart Benton. Be that type of person. If we have a lot of those squeaky wheels, so to speak, maybe we'll get some movement on this issue, because it isn't without precedence. When was the Illinois issue? When did they finally get their lands?
Yeah, so they finally got theirs. The Graduated Price Act was passed in 1854, and so they passed new legislation that said let's ameliorate, let's lessen the conditions to transfer the land, and they did, and it all disposed off in a certain number of years. But then again, Hawaii was 1959.
59, so, yeah.
And it wasn't until 1976.
What's the federal land percentage in Hawaii?
Minimal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe the federal courthouse and some other things.
Right. And so, this idea of federalism is real. There's no way we're going to tax our way to close a $2.6 billion education gap. You know that better than anyone. There's no way that we're going to tax our way out of a $7 billion dependency on a federal government that is already cutting back money into schools, into communities. They can't fund the fire protection. They're leaving our forests in a situation that just creates them as tinder. These are big issues.
The management of those federal lands has not been what we could do as a state, having given the opportunity,
yeah, it's
I believe.
abysmal. If you talk to Dick Buehler, our state forester, he's just beside himself, distraught that our forests are in the worst condition they've been in his lifetime. This is a career forester. And if you look at state-managed forests,
versus federal.
Yeah, they're harvested, they're managed, the watershed is managed. The fires, when they ravage through the federal forest, they get to state forest, they drop to the ground, and they're put out. In the federal forest, we can't harvest a tree. Even when the beetles have ravaged through the forest, we still can't harvest a tree. And so now that tinder is just sitting there as fuel to burn, which it is, I mean, all around us now. In fact, Al-Qaeda, the FBI has sent out criminal activity alerts to our state forester and others.
Interesting.
That Al-Qaeda is now publicizing throughout their terrorist network to use wildfire as a form of jihad because we've given them the fuel.
So I had a tour of Colorado state lands versus federal lands last year, and it was very stark, the difference in management. And even the people in Colorado were saying, which is more of a center, politically, center state, maybe a little center right, but they're appalled at the neglect that is given the forests in the state of Colorado, and we're suffering from that mismanagement here in Utah also. So the Illinois issue was back in the middle 1800s where they got their land back. We have the Hawaii situation, but we are in 2013 now, and there's a lot of time between at least 1850, 1860, and today. There's been some things that have happened in our governance that have actually diminished our role as a state. I'd like to maybe have a little bit of discussion about that, the 17th Amendment, and then maybe discuss in this next segment, as we're coming to the end of this one, how we can, what we can do with a little more detail. You have some ideas and I've been involved in those ideas on a national level. There's a lot of hope out there. I want to let the citizens know that we can make a change. We can steer this carrier in another way. It'll take some time, but we can start to reverse that trend. So stay with us at Legislative Update 1480 Radio, 1-800-776-1913. We have a question when we come back.